I remember the moment the air changed. It wasn't just the cold. I felt cold before. This was something else, something that crawled over my skin like a living shadow. I was standing only a few feet away from Marie Laveau's tomb, the white stone faintly glowing under the moonlight, when I first realized I wasn't alone. I heard gravel shifting behind me, slow, deliberate, like someone dragging their heel through the dirt, taking one slow step at a time. At first, I thought it was just another late visitor, someone ignoring the closing hours the same way I had. But when I turned my head, just slightly, just enough to catch the movement in my peripheral vision, there was no one there. Only the tombs, tall and cracked with age, watching me in silence. Then it appeared, a shadow, long, slender, unmistakably feminine. It slid across the ground behind me, stretching itself over the moss-covered stone like some impossible silhouette cast by a figure that wasn't there. I froze. My breath shook in my chest. The shadow stopped, then moved again. Not toward me, but with me. When I lifted my hand to wipe the sweat from my forehead, the shadow lifted its hand too, perfectly synchronized, but a split second after, like it was observing me, processing me, and then choosing to imitate me. I whispered, "Who's there?" My voice felt too small, swallowed by the cemetery's stale, humid air. There was no answer, only the distant hum of a jazz trumpet drifting from the French Quarter and the soft crackle of candles burning at the foot of her tomb. I stepped back. The shadow stepped forward. I stopped breathing, kept moving. Its arm rose slowly, bending at an angle my old bones could never mimic, smooth, graceful, almost ritualistic. Then its head tilted, and even though it was nothing but darkness on stone, I swear I felt its eyes on me, studying me, choosing me. The night around me fell silent. No insects, no faraway music, just the stillness of the dead. My heart hammered so hard I could hear it in my ears, and in that moment, one terrifying question formed in my mind. If the shadow wasn't mine, then who was casting it? That's the question I've carried with me since that night. And before this story ends, I'm going to tell you exactly what I discovered, though I still don't know if I should have ever turned around. I should probably tell you a little about myself before I go any further. My name doesn't matter. Not anymore. But I'm 78 years old, born and raised right here in New Orleans. I've lived long enough to watch the city change, to see neighborhoods rise and fall like the tides of the Mississippi. But the cemetery, St. Louis Cemetery No. 1, that place hasn't changed at all. My legs aren't what they used to be. I walk slow now, slower than I'd like, and every step comes with a soft crackle of old bones and a reminder that time has its claws in me. I visit the cemetery often, maybe more often than I should. Some people go to church for comfort. I go there. It started after my wife passed 6 years ago. The house got too quiet, the nights too long, and I found myself wandering the streets the way older folks do when their memories are slipping away and their hearts are too heavy to keep still. The cemetery felt peaceful to me in a strange way. Honest. The dead don't pretend. They don't lie. They don't leave you. I guess that's why I was there that night, long after the gates had closed. I wasn't looking for trouble or spirits or anything like that. I just wanted to feel close to someone again. Anyone. My memories of old New Orleans come back strongest when I'm among the tombs. The city used to smell like fresh beignet, tobacco, river water, and jasmine at night. Now it's car smoke and tourists. But inside the cemetery, inside, the air still feels like the New Orleans I grew up in. I remember the first time my grandmother told me about Marie Laveau. She said her spirit walked the cemetery after midnight, watching over the people who came to her with real intentions, good or bad. Respect her, Grandma told me, and she'll respect you back. I believed her then. Part of me still does. That's why I never disrespected the tomb, never touched anything, never took a token, never mocked the offerings people left. That night, I only wanted to sit near the white stone and talk to my wife the way I always did. I didn't go looking for shadows, but whatever followed me, whatever copied me, whatever watched me, it knew exactly who I was, and it knew I was alone. It began the moment I stepped off the main path and onto the smaller gravel trail that curves toward Marie Laveau's tomb. The air felt heavier there, thick, humid, like walking through warm fog. I remember wiping sweat from my forehead even though the night wasn't hot. It was the kind of heaviness that presses against your chest, makes you breathe a little harder. The candles near the tomb were still burning, small orange flames flickering even though there was no wind. Not a single leaf was moving. The air was dead still, too still. I heard the first sound then, footsteps, soft, crunching on the gravel, steady, following. I turned, expecting to see some teenagers sneaking around, but the path behind me was empty. I waited, listening. My ears aren't what they used to be, but they were sharp enough that night to catch every faint scratch of stone beneath invisible feet. The music from the quarter drifted over the walls, muted and far away, a trumpet holding a long, sorrowful note. But it faded suddenly, as if someone had turned a dial and muted the whole city. That kind of silence doesn't happen naturally in New Orleans. There's always noise, always life. Then came the whispers. Not English, not French, something between Creole and something older. Older than this city, older than me, older than the bones buried under my feet. The whispering slid between the tombs like smoke, curling around corners, brushing against my ears. I couldn't make out the words, but I felt them, cold and sharp, like fingertips grazing the back of my neck. I moved closer to her tomb. The candles flickered hard, almost as if reacting to my presence. And that's when the time changed. I looked at my watch, 11:17 p.m. I swear it was only a few breaths, a few heartbeats later, when I looked again, 12:03. I hadn't moved, I hadn't spoken, I had simply stood there. The footsteps behind me continued, slow, steady, matching my breath. But when I stepped forward, the shadow, her shadow, swept silently behind me. Not ahead, not beside me, behind me, always behind. I told myself I was imagining it. Old age, loneliness, the tricks of a tired mind. But then the shadow raised its arm, and mine stayed still. That was the moment I knew it wasn't a trick of the light. It wasn't my imagination. Something in that cemetery moved with purpose, and I was the one it had chosen to follow. I tried to convince myself that it was just the angle of the moon, or the flicker of candlelight, or maybe even my poor eyesight, but the shadow didn't care about my excuses. It stretched long and thin across the cracked stone, moving with a grace I haven't had since I was a young man. It bent at angles my own joints couldn't follow, paused when I moved, and moved when I stopped. Then the air shifted again. A smell drifted toward me, thick and sweet at first, like burning incense. But underneath it came something damp and earthy, like wet soil freshly turned. And beneath that, a third scent, faint but undeniable old perfume. Rose water, just like the one my grandmother used to wear when she lit candles for Marie Laveau. The scent moved around me, circling me, as if the air itself were walking in slow, deliberate steps. Then I heard it, a soft clicking sound, not like footsteps, more like beads tapping against bone. A necklace? A charm? A ritual object? The sound drifted past my ear, close enough that I felt the brush of cold air against my skin. When I turned, I saw movement, subtle, quick, like someone's dress swaying just out of sight behind a tall tomb. My breath caught in my throat. Something whispered my name. Not loud, not clear, but unmistakably my name. I froze in place. My hands trembled. My legs felt unsteady. Maybe my mind is failing me. I whispered to myself, I'm not as sharp as I used to be. I wanted to believe it was age. I wanted to believe it was grief. Anything but the truth forming at the edges of my thoughts. Because then the objects began to move. At the base of Marie Laveau's tomb lay dozens of offerings. Candles, coins, chalked X's, small bags of herbs tied with string. And one by one, the flames of the candles leaned toward me. Not sideways, not upward, directly toward me like they were bowing or being pulled by something. I stepped back. Something stepped forward. The whispers turned sharper, more urgent, more aware. For the first time that night, I felt a pressure at my back. like the weight of a hand hovering just an inch above my spine. I didn't dare turn around. Couldn't. Even old as I am, I knew that turning around wasn't the safe choice. But then the shadow made me. It drifted up the wall of a nearby tomb, elongated and distorted, then snapped back down to the ground at my feet. It began to move its hands, slow, fluid gestures, intricate motions like the vevs drawn during voodoo rituals. My own hands stayed still. Or maybe it was really her. The thought came not from fear, but recognition. Every sign, every whisper, every scent felt familiar in a way I couldn't explain. And yet, something else was hiding behind it. Something watching from deeper in the dark. I've had years to think about what happened that night. Years to replay every step, every whisper, every shift of the shadow. And the more I think about it, the more I realize there are only a few explanations. None of them comforting. The theory that chills my blood the most is that it really was Marie Laveau, her spirit, or some echo of her, lingering in the cemetery long after midnight. People say she protected those who came seeking guidance, and punished those who came with disrespect. I came seeking comfort, but maybe she saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. Another possibility is darker. Some people in New Orleans believe that rituals performed long ago don't simply fade. They stay alive in the places where they were cast. Energy sticks to stone, to soil, to memories. What no one in New Orleans dares to admit is that some rituals were never meant to end. Maybe I walked into one that was still breathing, still moving, still choosing anyone foolish enough to stand near the tomb after closing. There's another theory, one I've never told anyone. Curse, not placed by Marie Laveau herself, but by someone who came long after her. Someone who used her tomb as a conduit, twisting her legacy into something darker. Maybe that shadow wasn't a spirit at all, but a fragment of a curse meant for someone else. And I was simply the one who stepped into its path. But the last theory, the one I can barely bring myself to speak. Some people say her spirit still walks there after midnight. Others whisper that the dead don't just rest. They reach out, they mimic, they copy, and sometimes they choose a body, a voice, a life to replace the one they lost. What I saw behind me that night, what followed me, what copied me, maybe it wasn't warning me, maybe it wasn't haunting me, maybe it was studying me, waiting to see if it wanted to become me. And that thought, that impossible, terrible thought, is the one that still wakes me in the middle of the night. I didn't run that night. Maybe I should have. Maybe any sane person would have. But when you're old, when the world has already taken so much from you, you learn that fear doesn't always move your legs the way it used to. Sometimes it just freezes you, forces you to listen. So I stood there, in that silent cemetery, surrounded by shadows that didn't belong to me, by whispers that weren't carried by the wind. And all I could think was, why me? What does it want from me? Then something small happened. Something so quick, so subtle, that if I hadn't lived it myself I would swear it was a trick of age. The shadow, my shadow, tilted its head. Not like a reflection, not like a delayed imitation. Tilted its head first, and I followed, as if it were leading me. For the first time, I felt a pull. Not physical, but deep inside, like someone gently tugging on a string tied to my spine. I don't know what would have happened if I had taken one step forward. Maybe I would have crossed into something I wasn't meant to cross. Maybe I would have lost a part of myself I'd never get back. But then, from the far end of the cemetery, the sound of a police car echoed through the streets. Just one quick burst of a siren cutting through the night. It was enough. The shadow snapped back. The whispers cut off. The scent vanished like smoke swallowed by darkness. And suddenly, I was alone. Completely, undeniably alone. I stood there for several minutes, unable to move. When I finally walked toward the gate, my legs felt heavy, like I was pulling them out of deep mud. Every step felt like it took effort, like something didn't want me to leave. When I reached the iron gate, I looked back one last time. I swear to you, I swear on every ounce of truth I have left in this old body. One of the candles near the tomb was still leaning toward me, like it was waiting for me to return. I never did. But even today, years later, when the house gets quiet and the lights are low, I still feel that pull. I still feel that presence. And sometimes, when I'm standing near a wall or walking past a dim hallway, my shadow flickers, just for a second, just enough to remind me, maybe I didn't leave alone. And if you ever find yourself in New Orleans after midnight, if you feel a strange breeze behind your neck, if you smell rosewater where no one's standing, if your shadow doesn't quite move the way you do, turn back, walk away. Don't make the same mistake I did. Because once something from the other side notices you, it never fully lets go.